Mysterious objects moving in impossible ways, extraterrestrial encounters, and bizarre moments that can't be explained.
Big head and big black eyes and a long thin nose and little mouth, and she could make a cry.
These recordings are turning into mysteries that the internet keeps obsessing over. Something hanging in the sky above Peru drew attention from people on the ground who couldn't find a comfortable explanation for what they were seeing. A red-colored object held its position in the air with a stillness that weather phenomena don't typically produce. Then a smaller, circular orb emerged from beneath it, gradually, deliberately, moving away from the larger object with clear, directional intention, rather than drifting randomly. The entire sequence carried a quality of purpose that separated it from anything atmospheric. Nothing about the movement suggested an accident or natural cause. Whatever the smaller orb was heading toward, it seemed to know exactly where that was before it even appeared. Fiery object. A group of friends spending time outside at night had their conversation stopped by something appearing in the sky above them. A fiery object descended with a bright trailing streak behind it, clearly visible against the surrounding darkness and moving in a way that produced immediate and visible alarm among everyone present.
Whoa! Nah! Hey, bro, it's gonna start shaking.
Within seconds, someone in the group named what they were all thinking. Something was coming down, and it wasn't anything they recognized. The reactions captured on their footage carried the specific quality of genuine surprise, rather than performance. Nobody in that group had stepped outside expecting to film whatever was currently dropping toward the earth in front of them.
Boy, that shit's dropping on.
UFO files.
To begin releasing government files relating to UFOs and unexplained aerial phenomena.
Something shifted in the conversation around government UFO documentation when Donald Trump publicly acknowledged that a review of classified files had produced results he described as genuinely interesting.
As you remember, I recently directed the Secretary of War. How good is Pete Hegseth doing, by the way?
He directed Pete Hegseth to begin the process of identifying and releasing those documents, and added that the first batch would arrive very soon.
This process is well underway, and we found many very interesting documents, I must say, and the first releases will begin very, very soon.
Language specific enough to separate it from the kind of distant promises these topics typically generate. The detail that drew most attention wasn't the announcement itself, but what it implied. Significant buildup around a release process doesn't typically surround documents containing nothing worth finding. Whatever has been sitting inside those files for years appears to be approaching a point where staying hidden becomes considerably harder. Orb splits. A man filming outdoors at night looked upward and found a large neon blue orb occupying the sky above him, glowing with a clarity that night footage rarely produces. As he kept the camera running, two smaller orbs detached from the main object and drifted away in separate directions, each one carrying the same blue luminescence as the source they had separated from.
Oh my God, there's more coming.
The main orb remained in position after releasing them, holding its place while its two counterparts moved toward destinations the footage couldn't follow. The color alone set the entire sighting apart from conventional explanations. Nothing that belongs in a normal sky glows that particular shade of blue with that kind of consistency. Pilot films sphere. A Colombian commercial pilot cruising above 30,000 feet encountered something moving alongside his aircraft that he felt compelled to film. The object was spherical and dark, positioned clearly above the cloud layer below, with open sky surrounding it on every side. At that altitude, the standard explanations available for lower altitude sightings simply don't apply. Weather balloons and consumer drones have operational ceilings far beneath where this object was observed. The pilot's reaction while filming suggested someone who had spent considerable time in controlled airspace and was now looking at something that didn't belong in any category that airspace experience had prepared him for. Forest descent. Footage recorded in Mexico during December 2020 shows a circular object appearing in the sky, shifting colors before descending smoothly into a forested area below and vanishing completely. The movement throughout carried a controlled, deliberate quality. Nothing erratic, nothing suggesting an unguided fall. It came down the way something guided from inside would come down, steady and purposeful until the trees absorbed it entirely. The whole sequence lasted only seconds, but left a specific impression that outlasted the viewing. Whatever entered that forest on that particular day never emerged on camera again, and nobody standing anywhere near those trees has since offered a satisfying explanation for what went in. Beam abduction. A UFO hovering low enough to be seen clearly against a tree line opened a door on its underside and directed a bright beam straight down to the ground below. A dark shape began moving upward through that beam steadily, without resistance, and disappeared inside the craft above. The door closed. The beam was cut off. Nothing came back down. Whether what traveled up through that light was an object or something living, the footage doesn't clarify. What it does show clearly is a sequence that begins with a beam reaching downward and ends with something that had been on the ground no longer being there. That absence is the part that stays with people long after the clip ends. Feeding alien. Footage from Russia showed something that would have generated immediate global headlines if its authenticity could be confirmed. A scientist stood in darkness casually hand-feeding raw meat to a figure that carried no human features, lean, large-eyed, unmistakably non-terrestrial in appearance. The figure accepted the food without hesitation, without alarm, without any adjustment in behavior that suggested novelty. That ease between them implied history, multiple prior interactions at minimum. The clip raises a question that the footage itself cannot answer, but plants firmly. If this interaction was this routine, how long had Russia been maintaining contact with extraterrestrial beings, while the rest of the world was told nothing of the kind existed? Dark orb. On October 15th, 2022, someone in Mexico City filmed a dark round object holding position in the sky above them with a stillness that immediately divided everyone who watched the footage. The shape was clean and consistently circular, and its ability to maintain exactly the same position without drift was the detail that kept the argument running. Half of those who commented reached immediately for the balloon explanation and stayed there. The other half looked at the same stillness, the same clean edges, and the same controlled presence in open sky, and concluded that no balloon behaved quite like that. Both sides watched identical footage and arrived at completely opposite certainties, which is precisely why the clip kept circulating. Mysterious orb. Security camera footage captured a scene that generated more questions than any single explanation could cover. A man stood alone in an open outdoor space, completely still, while a glowing orb moved in deliberate circles around him. His posture throughout suggested no alarm, no confusion, no attempt to move away or document what was happening. He simply stood there while it circled. That stillness became the most discussed element of the clip, not the orb itself, but the man's complete absence of surprise at its presence. Whether the two shared some prior familiarity, or whether what was happening existed entirely beyond his ability to process, his reaction made the footage impossible to set aside quickly. Alien discovery. Villagers in India gathering at night around something in an open field found themselves standing over a body that matched no living creature any of them recognized. Pale, extremely thin, with an oversized head and large dark eyes that dominated a small face, the figure lay still, apparently no longer alive at the point of discovery. Phone lights pointed downward from every direction as the crowd grew, and nobody in that crowd offered an explanation that others accepted. The footage traveled far beyond the village rapidly, carrying with it a debate that hasn't closed. Circular object. Someone filming the sky noticed a perfectly circular object moving across it with a smoothness that immediately separated it from conventional aircraft. Underneath its surface, multiple lights held a structured pattern, not random, not blinking irregularly, but arranged as though they served a specific function. The object crossed the visible sky and then disappeared cleanly, leaving no trail, no sound, no gradual fade. It was present and then it wasn't, with nothing in between those two states to explain the transition. People who watched it happen stood looking at the empty sky afterward, trying to reconstruct what kind of object could appear with that clarity. Backyard alien. Unusual sounds coming from the woods behind his home pulled a Brazilian man outside late at night to investigate. Moving toward the tree line, he found the source a gray, thin-bodied figure standing quietly among the bushes, large dark eyes visible in the low light, its presence carrying none of the alarm a human trespasser might project. It simply stood there. The man's shock overtook any impulse toward contact, and he left the area quickly, returning the following day with the hope of finding physical evidence, footprints, disturbed ground, anything he found the spot completely undisturbed. The figure was gone and had apparently left nothing behind to confirm it had ever stood there at all. Lightning orb. An orb moving steadily above a set of railroad tracks one evening drew attention not just for its presence, but for what it was doing while it moved. Every few seconds, bursts of electricity discharged from its surface, not random static, but consistent pulses that gave the object a quality closer to something living than something mechanical. It followed the tracks with clear directional purpose before heading toward the trees at the far end. Nobody watching could identify what kind of energy source moves independently through an isolated railroad area at night, discharging electricity as it goes, apparently aware of its own destination and entirely unbothered by anything around it. Rock alien. A man hiking alone along a rocky mountain trail discovered something wedged between boulders that stopped him completely. A small dark figure looked back at him from the gap, enormous black eyes fixed forward, elongated fingers extended outward in his direction. Whether it had chosen that space deliberately or become trapped inside, it was impossible to determine from where he stood. The extended hand carried equal possibility of threat or desperation, and he had no intention of staying close enough to find out which one it was. He backed away and left quickly. What remained of that encounter after he cleared the trail, whether the figure freed itself, waited, or was found by someone else, has never been established. Pyramid formation. Someone driving past the pyramids at night captured something rising from behind the ancient structures that produced immediate and widespread reaction online. 4 bright orbs lifted slowly and steadily into the air above the pyramid line. No urgency, no erratic movement, just a calm, coordinated ascent that felt deliberately paced. Then they repositioned. The 4 lights arranged themselves into 2 side-by-side pairs, and the formation they produced looked less like separate objects and more like the eyes of something enormous watching silently from above. Comments flooded in, and theories spread in every direction. None of them landed on an explanation that held up long enough to close the conversation, which remains open. Blue aliens. A hiker moving through a rocky outdoor area came upon a scene that replaced every thought in his head with a single overriding instinct to leave. A group of blue-skinned beings worked together in a coordinated effort to move a large object toward the entrance of a nearby cave. Their movements carry the efficiency of a team with a specific and predetermined purpose. This wasn't exploration, it was deliberate concealment. What the object contained and why it needed to disappear inside that cave remained completely unknown to the hiker, who became aware at a certain point that he might have already been noticed. He left without investigating further and didn't look back. Eggcraft.
New whistleblower is coming forward saying he's not just saying he's heard about a secret government program to retrieve UFO crash remains. He says he's worked on this program. He claims to have video to prove it and credentialed colleagues who back him up, and he has the attention of at least one senior lawmaker.
A former helicopter pilot named Jake Barber came forward, claiming direct involvement in government recovery operations targeting unidentified crashed objects.
Well, I was a helicopter pilot, and I operate with 150-foot to 200-foot long line. So I got within 150 feet of this object.
What did you see?
I saw an egg, a white egg.
He described flying low on a long line, closing within 150 feet of something on the ground that matched no known aerospace design. No wings, no visible propulsion, no thermal signature, just a white egg-shaped object sitting where it had come down. His team's assigned purpose was retrieval, not investigation, but the questions the mission generated didn't stay behind when he left.
Was there any visible propulsion system on it?
No, not what we would know. There's no engine, there was no thermal signature.
He later connected with other veterans carrying similar accounts, collectively describing repeated encounters with technology that existed entirely outside the boundaries of anything publicly acknowledged or conventionally explained. Alien memories.
A big head and big black eyes and a long, thin nose and a little mouth. And she could make a cry, but she didn't speak or warble or anything. She could go, oh, like that. And it could be when she did it loudly or powerfully. It was very, very intense.
After publishing his book, Whitley Strieber began connecting fragments of unusual childhood memories from Texas into something larger and more unsettling. Patterns emerged over time, missing stretches of time, strange physical sensations, and recurring experiences that resisted ordinary explanation. Family conversations added unexpected layers, with relatives describing their own encounters involving unidentified craft and military activity. One relative with Air Force connections claimed direct exposure to debris from the Roswell incident, insisting what he examined was nothing conventionally manufactured. Strieber eventually concluded these weren't isolated incidents, but pieces of something continuous and deeply complex.
And when he goes out there, he sees this craft just above the tree line, and it's huge. It's filling the sky, and the thought occurs to him, oh my God.
Forest orb. Deep inside a Texas forest, a glowing orange orb was captured, moving slowly between the trees with a soft surrounding light that had no obvious source. Zooming into the footage didn't simplify anything. It removed the remaining familiar reference points and left something that fit no straightforward category. The setting contributed as much to the unease as the object itself. An orb descending through a dense forest in complete isolation carries a different quality than light seen over open sky. Whatever it was appeared to be moving with intention rather than drifting, and the footage carried a persistent feeling of having captured something that had every reason to expect it wouldn't be seen. Area 51.
30 years ago today, KLAS aired a live interview with an anonymous man who made some really astonishing claims. He alleged that the U.S. military was secretly studying alien technology out in the Nevada desert near a base that is now very well known all over the world, Area 51.
30 years ago, a television station aired a live interview with an anonymous man whose face was hidden and whose claims were extraordinary. He described working near Area 51 at a classified site where non-human craft were being studied, not reverse-engineered from human blueprints, but analyzed as objects built with technology that had no basis in anything scientifically understood.
Totally impossible. The propulsion system is a gravity propulsion system. The power source is an antimatter reactor. This technology does not exist at all.
Gravity-based propulsion, antimatter power sources. He described systems that shouldn't exist. On May 15th, 1989, he revealed himself as Bob Lazar. Believers said he had finally exposed something long buried. Skeptics pushed back hard. What nobody could dispute was his consistency across decades of scrutiny. His account never shifted, never expanded conveniently, never changed.
Bob Lazar claims our government captured alien spaceships, UFOs, and keeps them in a secret warehouse.
They are actively and have in their possession alien spacecraft, and they are actively undergoing analysis.
Roswell site. Near Roswell, New Mexico, a specific location has carried a particular weight since 1947. The site where witnesses described something coming down, not in a straight crash, but in a bouncing, skipping motion across the desert surface before finally coming to rest further out.
When an object crashes, they're going to scatter a variety of materials around. Knobs, control devices, plastic, wires, whatever. If it's coming apart, it's going to leave those pieces behind. And those are the kinds of pieces that I want to find and have found some of.
Decades later, investigators returned to that same ground with geological equipment. Metal fragments pulled from the soil showed layered internal structures and material compositions that didn't correspond to any standard aircraft manufacturing process. When something comes apart on impact, it leaves pieces behind, and those pieces carry information about what they once belonged to. Roswell memory.
We parked the car, got out of the car, and walked down a hillside. And as we came around a bend in the arroyo that had pinon and cedar trees growing on it, we were able to see farther ahead down the arroyo. And on the next ridge line, there was a large silver disc-shaped object that was embedded in the side of the ridge line.
In a 1991 interview with UFO researcher Stanton Friedman, Gerald Anderson shared a childhood memory from New Mexico in 1947 that had never left him. While out with family searching for rocks near San Augustine Plains, they entered a remote desert stretch and found a large silver disc embedded partway into a ridge. Moving closer, Anderson described small, non-human figures near the craft and an unusual heaviness to the silence surrounding the area. Military vehicles arrived shortly after, soldiers quickly establishing a perimeter and issuing direct warnings that what the family had witnessed was not to be discussed. Alien interview. Footage claimed to originate from a classified facility known as S4 showed a darkened room where an alien being sat behind glass inside a biocontainment area, the low light maintained specifically for its comfort. A telepath attempted communication but received nothing coherent in return. During the session, the being's condition began declining visibly and noticeably. Medical personnel were summoned, but their response was slow. According to the accompanying narration, these beings had eliminated microbial and viral life from their own environment long ago, leaving them completely vulnerable to Earth's microscopic organisms, which could colonize their respiratory systems without resistance. The footage closes with medical staff gathered around a being that had deteriorated significantly from the moment the session began. Colors shifting. Something dropped out of the sky fast, cycling through colors as it fell that no manufactured aircraft is designed to produce. The shift moved through shades continuously, accompanying an erratic descent that suggested either total loss of control or a deliberate, evasive pattern impossible to distinguish from the outside. It approached the tree line, still changing, still moving without any predictable trajectory, before driving straight into the forest below in a single, direct motion. No impact sound followed. No smoke rose from the trees. No physical disturbance marked where it had entered. The sky above was empty, and the forest below showed nothing. Navy encounters. Around 2020, pilots flying off the USS Theodore Roosevelt near Virginia Beach began picking up radar contacts that didn't belong to anything in their operational area. Navy pilot Ryan Graves and his squadron tracked signals appearing consistently in the same locations. Not random interference, but structured presence.
What we were seeing out there were essentially radar contacts that we didn't think belonged there. Two aircraft from my squadron were flying out to the area one day, and they were about 100 feet or so apart. As they were flying through the area, the lead pilot in this aircraft saw an object zip right by his aircraft.
During one flight, a pilot described a dark cube sitting inside a transparent sphere, passing dangerously close to his aircraft at speed. The crew returned shaken, reporting a near collision. Reports multiplied after that, with wingless, exhaustless, cockpit-free objects appearing sometimes daily. Many pilots stayed silent, fearing professional judgment. No official explanation has since been confirmed for what that squadron kept encountering above the Atlantic. Metallic orb. A biker traveling along an open road looked up and found something moving just above the ground nearby that shouldn't have been there. He raised his camera and captured a solid, reflective metallic orb gliding at low altitude with no visible means of propulsion keeping it airborne. The footage showed something structured and deliberate rather than any drifting atmospheric object. Shortly after the orb appeared on camera, 2 jets entered the frame, moving in the same direction, suggesting someone else had already taken notice. The video disappeared from the platform it was posted to with unusual speed, which for many viewers only confirmed that what the biker had filmed was considerably more significant than a curious anomaly. Travis Walton abduction.
Take it back to the day that this happened. You're 22, you're logging, you're in the woods. Tell me what happened.
You know, when you're done working hard physical labor, everybody's kind of jacked up, and there was a whole lot of chatter in the car. We're just talking away, you know, it's starting to get dark. We just loaded up our equipment, and I looked up ahead, and I saw this kind of glow coming through the trees.
On November 5th, 1975, Travis Walton and his logging crew were driving out of the woods after a long shift when a glowing object appeared near the road. Travis stepped out and approached it, expecting it to leave before he got close. It didn't. A beam struck him and threw him backward. His crew fled in panic. When Travis regained awareness, he was inside an unfamiliar space, small figures standing over him. He reacted with fear, pushed through curved corridors, past a room filled with what looked like stars and controls, then lost consciousness again. He woke up on the road. The case carried multiple witnesses and polygraph results that consistently supported his account across decades of scrutiny. Sky stones.
Strange blue stones called sky stones have been found with the statues. And at first, archaeologists thought, okay, it's just blue stones. But when they analyzed it, and they couldn't figure out how these had been made too, although the people in Sierra Leone felt that they were actually pieces of the blue sky that fell with the anomaly.
An old legend from Sierra Leone describes beings called the Nimali figures, believed to have arrived from somewhere beyond Earth, accompanied by pieces of sky that solidified and fell alongside them during atmospheric entry. Unusual blue stones found near associated statues in the region initially seemed like ordinary mineral deposits until laboratory analysis began producing contradictions. 12 separate labs tested the same materials and returned 12 different conclusions about their composition and origin. No consensus formed. No natural geological process has been identified that accounts for their formation. Whether these stones represent fragments of something that broke apart entering the atmosphere centuries ago, or remnants of technology brought from somewhere humans have never reached, remains a question science has not yet closed. Plasma orb. A camper in Mexico watched an orange glowing object move steadily above the mountain range nearby, and managed to keep a camera trained on it long enough to capture its full behavior. It held a slow, deliberate pace against the dark sky, its color carrying a plasma-like quality that separated it visually from any conventional light source or aircraft navigation system. Then it changed direction entirely, not gradually, not with any banking motion that physical aircraft require, but instantly and completely. Nobody who has examined the footage has produced a credible explanation for an object that combines that specific appearance with that specific capacity for instantaneous directional change at altitude above a remote Mexican mountain range. Sky opening. A hiker moving through mountain terrain stopped when something above caught his attention. A circular object hung in the air with a transparency that made it look less like a physical craft and more like an opening cut into the sky itself. Then 2 metallic orbs emerged from within it and began a slow, deliberate descent toward the tree line below. He watched them drop and disappear into the trees. Nothing followed, no sound, no movement, no indication of where they had gone once the forest absorbed them. What created that opening, what sent those orbs through it, and where they ultimately ended up after entering those trees has never been answered by anyone. River abduction.
Last October, in the quiet Mississippi town of Pascagoula, 2 local men confronted authorities with a rather bizarre story. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker told of a strange craft landing near their fishing site and of being taken aboard by 3 unearthly creatures.
In October 1973, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker were fishing near Pascagoula, Mississippi, when a craft appeared above the water with flashing blue lights, hovering close to the ground before opening. 3 short, pale beings emerged heads, sitting directly on shoulders, with no visible neck. Facial features pointed where a nose would be. The men reported being taken inside against their will, scanned by a bright light, then released. Police who received their report described both men as genuinely distressed. Hypnosis sessions and lie detector tests followed, with supporters noting the account remained consistent throughout. Neither man gained anything from the story. Both carried it for the rest of their lives without wavering from what they said happened that night. Utah flash. Something appeared in the sky above Murray, Utah on October 2nd, 2024 that didn't match any standard explanation available to the people who watched it. A glowing ball materialized without sound, no sonic boom, no trailing streak associated with meteors. Instead, it pulsed repeatedly, each flash carrying a regularity that felt less like deterioration and more like deliberate signaling. Then, it was gone, vanishing cleanly between one moment and the next without completing any trajectory. Witnesses who saw it directly had no framework to place around what they had just watched. If it wasn't a meteor, and the absence of both sound and trail strongly argued against that, then what exactly was flashing above Utah that night remains open. Nurse saw bodies. During an interview connected to Air Force research into the Roswell incident, mortician Glenn Dennis recounted what a nurse had told him in confidence. She described witnessing 3 small bodies inside the base, thin, fragile, large-headed, bearing no resemblance to human anatomy in their proportions or features.
Well, she said the head, in the little drawings that I had, the way she explained it and the way she drew it, that the heads were somewhat larger than a human.
She had sketched what she saw and was visibly shaken while describing it, struggling to maintain composure throughout the conversation. Shortly after sharing this account with Dennis, she was transferred without warning. A letter arrived, later suggesting something had happened to her. From that point forward, nobody could confirm her location or verify what had become of her, and her account exists now without anyone to corroborate or continue it. Brazil orb. A woman in Brazil filmed something above open ground that she described repeatedly as enormous, her voice carrying the specific quality of someone genuinely overwhelmed rather than performing surprise. The footage showed a large metallic orb with no features matching any conventional aircraft design, no wings, no visible propulsion, no structural logic that aligned with anything publicly acknowledged. What separated this clip from similar footage was what happened to it afterward. It was removed from platforms repeatedly, each takedown drawing more attention than the original upload had generated. Something about that specific footage motivated, consistent, and rapid removal. Whether that pattern reflected automated systems flagging unusual content or something more deliberate, the removals themselves became the most discussed element of the entire incident. U-2 secret. By the mid-1950s, classified aircraft testing was already underway at Area 51, including flights of the U-2 spy plane engineered to operate above standard radar detection range. Reports of unidentified objects moving at extreme altitudes began emerging from surrounding areas shortly after. Civilian pilots and observers were seeing the U-2 during secret test runs without any context for what it was. Since the program couldn't be acknowledged publicly, Officials redirected the sightings toward weather phenomena and atmospheric explanations. Area 51 continued expanding its classified operations from that point forward, eventually becoming the most deliberately secretive military installation on the planet, a reputation built partly on secrets it created and partly on ones it inherited. Wind farm. A man near a wind farm looked up and found something descending through the sky that didn't correspond to anything in his existing reference points for aircraft. He filmed a large, circular object making its way slowly downward, no wings, no engine sound, no flight pattern matching commercial or military aviation he had encountered before. The descent was steady and unhurried, carrying the quality of something in full control of its own movement, rather than falling. He stated clearly while filming that what he was watching matched nothing he could identify from known aircraft categories. Whether the wind farm below had anything to do with drawing it there, he didn't speculate. He just kept the camera running. Rendlesham Binary Download. In December 1980, security personnel at a U.S. Air Force base in England encountered something in the adjacent forest that none of them had language for afterward. Airman John Burroughs and his team spotted unusual lights among the trees during a routine patrol. The air around them changed physically, a static electricity sensation building against their skin that intensified the closer they moved toward the source. Sergeant Peniston reached a triangular black craft resting in the trees and touched its surface. He described receiving an immediate mental download of binary code at that contact point. When the code was eventually decoded years later, it referenced an origin point of 8,100, suggesting not another planet, but another point in time entirely. Sky Streak. A family driving home one evening in Russia watched the sky around their vehicle suddenly illuminate from above. A massive streak of light crossed overhead at a speed that the eye struggled to follow, bright enough to cast light across the surrounding landscape for the duration of its passage. The behavior it displayed during that crossing didn't align with standard meteor characteristics. The pattern was wrong. The movement carried qualities that meteorological and astronomical explanations didn't comfortably account for. The footage spread widely afterward, splitting viewers between those reaching for natural causes and those who felt what crossed that Russian sky that evening operated according to rules science hasn't formally documented yet. Falling lights. Late one night in Dubai, multiple glowing objects came down from the sky in the vicinity of the city's buildings, each one trailing a visible streak behind it as it descended. The urban backdrop made the proximity immediately clear these weren't distant objects over open desert, but something dropping close to a densely populated metropolitan area. Several appeared simultaneously, coming down within the same window of time.